With one, is it possible on mine, home one? You don't have AI down. The, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank you. Hello. But you
Can't
need-
reach.
Well, remember I had COVID recently, so I can mask
No,
that.
but you're
So welcome. We're so pleased to see you. It's hardly, I always think that in September I should organize everything and I should be a year older and I ought to have new pencils. But there's something about September. So why don't we just go around and say one thing you're looking forward to in the next year. And nothing, somebody else, nothing to look forward to. I'm gonna take a boat trip sometime soon. So
art and stuff.
Out of Puget Sound somewhere. Okay, how about you, Tracy?
I couldn't hear what you said.
What are you looking forward to?
Man, you mean climate-wise?
No, life-wise.
Oh, life-wise. Well, the Miyawaki Forest celebration at the end of the month. I'm gonna miss picnic in the park, but I'll see a lot of you, I suspect, at that other thing, so.
Great. How about you, Linda?
The end of the election with the proper result.
How about you, Tamara?
Myself off mute. I am looking forward to, well, I guess something that happened, my kids going back to school. That was great.
Yeah.
Started on Wednesday.
Oh, start on Wednesday. Cool. How about you, Brian?
I just want to echo Tamara's going back to school with kids. That was always a monumental thing for me too. No, I'm looking forward to. In fact, I think I see. Is that Dana? Is Dana there?
Yes.
Yeah,
And
Dana. I'm going to Dana Campbell's and Jeff Jensen's property out on Henry Island. My brother and I are going to do some camping for a couple days, and we're going to witness life in the slow zone or slow the slow life, I guess, is in the island life. It's gonna be fun.
Awesome.
And Anne, I think you're there, but I don't see anything.
I sure am. I'm looking forward to pie season. I always think of the fall as pie season.
Yes. Okay, how about Dana? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to going to my cousin's daughter's wedding on Lummi Island this weekend. And I've never been to Lummi Island, and you take a 5-minute ferry to get there.
Oh. How about you, Mimi?
All I can think of is next summer.
Next summer. Oh, me too.
I know summer, so yeah, this one's not gone yet.
Right? Yeah, that's right. We don't have
Mimi, that is so depressing. That is so. Does anybody have anything to give Mimi right now, like some uppers or something? I mean,
I ate my cookies, so there's nothing you can do for me.
We'll just wake you up.
Yeah.
Shooting
You're
around.
again. Matt, we're asking the question just in terms of introduction. What are you looking forward to?
It's a great question.
I'm
Looking forward to
I'm not sure who's more depressing.
I think we're gonna go backpacking this weekend, so I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, climate committee is out of town. How about you, Corey? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to the next 2 community events coming up. end snowboarding season after hearing about Matt's snowboarding camp. Excited.
Wait,
Yeah.
Matt, do you run a snowboarding camp?
No, I went to snowboarding camp in June and it was really fun. So I'm really excited for snowboard season.
Well, there
That's
you
what
go.
he's looking
There.
forward to.
For the tribe.
I just survived the winter.
Snowboards.
So your events are picnic in the park and pause in the
Positive part.
pause in.
Oh, pause.
Yeah. Positive part.
There was something in Animal Acres that I meant to go and see. Maybe you know about it. There were little signs.
The Viva Latino America.
Oh,
The signs were a story.
They
that was
were
at
a
the library.
story.
Yeah, the library does like a book.
oh, it's the
They do it
library.
at Rising View and.
Oh, I meant to go and look
They
at
took
it.
it, do they have a schedule for?
Yeah,
what
they did like every month, they were doing a different
Okay.
one, and I think that they're done for this
Ah.
one. Cause it's winter. Well.
No.
Um, I'm gonna propose an alternative agenda and I sent it out to you and I have it up here. It's really the same thing, but ordered differently and with some events and some additions. So is there any objection to this revised
Nope.
Nope.
agenda?
Tracy has his hand up.
Oh, Tracy,
I don't know about everybody else online, but I think the speakerphone part of the display isn't working again. So I think it's only the speak or the receiver on the screen that's working. Is that correct, Corey?
I think Matt tried to fix it today, so.
Okay, yeah, because people who are speaking towards that phone or towards that thing from the sides, I'm not hearing you very well. I don't know if that's true.
Right.
for everyone else.
No, I am having the same problem, Tracy.
Okay.
Closer to the front.
maybe just move this closer to us. Okay, we're gonna try and,
You
Move
can
the
just put it
microphone.
on. Oh,
put it over there, yeah. Is that better? We moved the microphone.
hello. Testing, testing.
And Corey, can you talk?
Talk, Corey.
She is
I can't
talking.
hear you.
No, yeah,
Can you hear me?
just.
Well,
So it's the speaker up there? Is that where?
It might be, I don't know.
We could move down and just sit right there.
But they
the
still
hell?
can't hear Corey.
Well, then we'd be closer to the speaker.
where is, I thought this was the speaker.
Which one is working?
I think they're saying that it's that one.
So I realize that this might be a suboptimal solution, but like with my headset, I can hear the people fine. So I don't know if like a pair of headphones might help compensate for that somewhat.
I can also hear people fine. I'm not, maybe Tracy, it's your laptop computer might be muffled.
Well, it could be, but I think it's okay now. So go ahead. Thanks. Sorry about the interruption.
Well, please keep interrupting if you can't hear us and we will shout.
Mhm.
I sent out the agenda in advance. Does anybody need me to go through it before the revised agenda before we accept the revised agenda?
No.
Okay. Are there public comments? No, there are no public comments. So the first thing we wanted to talk about, I'm gonna shout. The first thing we wanted to talk about was the summer and fall events. And the first one is the picnic in the park, which is on September 7th, which is Saturday, from 2 to 6 p.m. And I don't know if, I don't recall from looking at the meeting who has signed up to do that. Is there anyone who has signed up for picnic in the park?
Is there an official sign up?
I don't know. It was last month when I wasn't here. I'll send something around. Is there anybody, I can be there, but is there somebody who can be there with me?
I can come.
I can come too.
Okay,
So on that note,
Yeah.
Corey, do you see a problem? So I'm all alone for the Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation on Saturday. Would combining a table together be absolute blasphemy?
I can, I'm putting up 2 tents, so I can just put you next to our 2 tents and we can just do that. And I was gonna put the tree board along with us as well, so.
Well, the tree board has their own tent and table.
Yeah, so I'll just make a long row of us somehow.
Okay,
So we don't need to bring a tent or a table?
No, I'll have 2 out there, so that'll be enough, and then you guys are bringing 1, so I'll just put each one of you on either side of us. I'll figure it out.
And we'll run up and down the tables attending to whoever shows up. Well, apparently, it was at a public presentation. We think it was Matt Mullenberg who presented, who reported on the Citizens Climate Action Lobby. And they had this format that says, where do you stand on climate change? And people put pins in it. And I talked with the Citizens Climate Action and they said they got it from the Yale climate something, climate group, and they're okay, and we can use this. And I thought it would be a good way of, when we're outside to engage people, just where do you stand on climate change? We need to have it made big, Corey, and I can have it made, I guess, because you don't have big printing capacity, do you?
No.
Okay. Any objections to?
How big do you need?
Mhm.
It was very interesting. The report that Matt showed was that overwhelmingly people were alarmed when they looked at the issue of climate change. There were 2 people who were dismissive, but almost, I'd say, 100 were clustered at the other end. The other was materials. As you probably all know, the city took a position on 2117, and there are a couple of things that we could use to put out there. These are handouts from the No on 2117, and I picked out 3. There were more, but this one was the pollution and air quality. And the second one was public transportation and infrastructure, and then the cost of fish habitat. We could put that on the Streamkeepers table. And then hoping this opens. I also created an information sheet that was more focused on Lake Forest Park, which apparently doesn't open. Right. But what if I told you it was good? I'll show it to people who can, and I thought that we could hand that out. Is there any other stuff? And then we have our usual stuff. We'll have our book, our climate action report, and a few other things, something on the book club. Is there other stuff that we ought to collect and put out there?
Fish? You have more fish?
Oh, do we have more fish?
I have some more fish. I'm making some more tomorrow.
Have
I
a
think
fish or a big hit.
I don't know how many, this is probably not nearly enough, right? That was like a leftover one, that's a cute puppet. So I brought it.
Good.
Great, I like the puppet.
I know.
If you have the kids make a puppet show.
So we don't have a ton here, but I will make about this much again.
Okay. I can pick them up at your house.
Yeah, or I can just bring them over to you.
Okay.
So here, I'll give you this whole bag.
Okay. And
There were ones to color, the ones that the kids would color.
These are colored.
But on paper too.
Oh, yeah.
When those run out,
I
then
have
those are the paper.
you have those?
Do you want me to print out some of the mascot ones though for you on paper?
Sure,
Like this guy,
sure,
the color?
sure. And I'm assuming that you have the box, Corey, with the crayons and those things, because I don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I have a stash of crayons.
There were some magic markers and from the picnic in the park, from
Oh, they were Sharpie marker.
Sharpie markers.
They weren't, I don't think they were in the box. I'll look.
Okay. Okay, I'll come pick up the box tomorrow. You're gonna be here?
I'll be here till like noon.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully my roll of blue tape got into the supplies. I had a
Wait.
roll of
We'll
the
look for it.
painter's tape.
Okay, we'll look for that, Ann. Okay, so we're set and ready to go. I think this is, again, what we want to do is talk to people about interactions we have with folks. An opportunity to talk about the climate action plan, where we are on it. Brian, as I read looked at the minutes from the last meeting, there was something about Streamfest, and you were gonna, I think it was you who was gonna contact City of Kenmore.
Oh, yeah, and I did. And let me tell you, we got some great responses that Kenmore, both Kenmore and Bothell are for a joint table. Unfortunately, I just found out that I am not going to be at Streamfest, so I feel a little bit bad that I sort of sent the lure out there and I've hooked some fish, but I can't bring them in.
When is it?
It's the 14th. So basically a week from this Saturday.
Oh, wow.
I
Well-
won't be here, but maybe I could get Jeff to go. It sounds like something
Jeff,
he.
Jeff mentioned that he would think about it. He said he had some things going on that day, but he
Oh.
think he might be able to swing it. But I was actually going to ask some stream keepers if they might want to participate. I haven't done that yet, but
Well,
yeah, that seems like something we should probably be at. But yeah, that was
Well-
something I did not have power over until I realized that it was happening too late. But
Brian, since I can't go on Saturday, I'll cover for you on next Saturday.
oh, fantastic! That's awesome. Perfect. And Tracy, would you be okay if I forward your name to Kenmore and Bothell about just kind of
would-
grouping a table together?
Utterly fine. When can I come pick up the stuff from you? Because I don't know when you were leaving.
Yeah, I won't be leaving until Friday, the
Oh, okay.
12th or 13th or whatever. But
All
I
right,
can, yeah.
I'll come.
What
I'll come
You're-
get your stuff.
you're back on the 12th, is that right?
Yep, for the
Yeah.
council meeting. Yep.
Yeah, I can meet you anytime then.
Mhm.
Okay, Brian, what time is Streamfest? Do you know?
Yeah, hold on. I've got a text message about that. Let me get to that, please. 1 second.
Yeah, and where is it?
So it's right at Log Boom Park.
Hmm.
And I can actually forward you guys the actual flyer. It's from 1 to 4 p.m.
What I will do is also send out a note to the committee and ask them if there are other people who want to come.
That would be great.
Okay,
I think Jeff has done that one before and has a cool game that he's taken that is it's like
The fish launcher.
a fish watcher.
Oh, launcher. The launcher where you step on
Launcher,
the
yeah,
paddle and you launch
Yeah.
the fish into the thing. Yeah.
Did he tell you about that?
Oh no, he brought it last time. So Jeff and I did this
Yeah.
last year.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was fun. But
You want that?
oh my God, yeah. Kids loved it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
and we can do
We
more fish.
We were a
More
magnet.
fish. And he likes to give out gummy fish, the Swedish fish, as prizes. If there are any Swedish fishes around.
That we're not calling them Swedish fish, we're calling them kokanee.
Yes.
Yeah, coconut.
Little red fish.
Okay, great. Now, and we had some good news about the climate hub. So I'm gonna stop sharing and give this over to Dana.
But I'm not on Zoom.
Uh,
How do I do this?
Let me share my screen.
Are you on Zoom?
I'm on Zoom and I have your PowerPoint on my screen, but we're just
So
weren't coming.
amazing. Yes.
Oh, I cannot start screen share while the other participant is sharing.
Okay.
For here on us.
Open. Open. Why isn't it open?
Big.
Sure. You bakers.
For slideshow.
Yeah. This is a. Here's slideshow.
Awesome. You're leaving. Okay. Wait a second. So this is so exciting. Over the summer, I participated in a course through Mid-Sound Fisheries, and it's a free course called Community Action Training School. And so it was a series of lectures based on restoration of salmon and salmon habitat, and also some field trips, which were really fun. And part of the whole thing about this course is that they ask you to do a project that's a 50-hour or more project. I think all of them are way more than 50 hours. But I proposed as a project to enhance the town commons with a climate action mural or a climate hub. And the idea is to have this like totally in-person resource for interesting things about climate and things that are going on environmentally in the town, because there's so many different organizations and committees and people that are working on stuff in Lake Forest Park that I feel like it just kind of gets dissipated, and having a center where we can highlight all of that stuff and talk to people about it, I think is a really good idea. So I talked to Merlon Geyer people, begging them for a space to put the mural, and asked them if we could use this big brown wall that is so ugly in the back of the commons across from the stage. And they said yes. So we are able to put in a mural there, which will, I'm envisioning it being an interactive sort of mural where there will be a background and then ways for us to curate exhibits in there for ongoing activities of interest or events or info, whatever it is that we feel like we need. We also got them to agree to give us access to one of these kiosks, that thing that's on the right over there. And so we can store interactive displays. We could man the kiosk as like, if we can put together a schedule with volunteers to go down. I don't know, however often we want to talk about climate and talk about how it impacts our town, and have interactive activities and stuff to engage people with that. And also we can have it as a place for putting pamphlets or informational things that people can pick up or whatever else. So moving forward with that, now we just have to figure out how to get that mural and things up on the board and in this kiosk, because they're ready to let us start whenever we want to. So I have put together a mock-up of what I thought a good thing would be for a mural, and I have it here. So on that big long wall, which is 20 feet long, I was thinking we could have a climate stripe border at the bottom. So I don't know if you guys know the climate stripes visualization of how temperatures are changing over time. This one goes from 1850 on the left to 2023 on the right. And it's color coded so that, you know, temperatures, average annual temperature for Seattle, if it's above the, you know, the average, some average that's based on a 50-year average or something, somewhere in there. Depending on how much above, it's brighter and brighter red. Depending on how much below the average that annual temperature is, it's brighter and brighter blue. And so this just kind of gives you a visual over time showing how we're moving into the brighter and brighter reds. And then I was thinking that we could have some stripes at the end that we paint each year. So we would do 2024, 2025 as they progress. And we can kind of have people think about, well, what is our future going to look like? What color are we going to be painting those things? And how can we be involved in trying to get them less bright red? So that's the bottom. Along the top, because this is such a natural timeline, it seems kind of neat to have maybe some kind of display where we could show historical, just historical facts or historical something or others along that timeline. And so we came to an idea where maybe we could have a interactive like lift up thing. So the data is on the front maybe, and people would lift up the board and underneath it would tell you the sorts of things that are happening there. And I have, like I put in a few, you probably can't see this, but you can look at the PowerPoint later. So underneath I put a few historical things in there, like starting with the Duwamish winter village here that the Duwamish were on the shores right in Lake Forest Park up until about 1903. So that whole first period was them. And then we've got things on there like when Lake Forest Park was founded and when Shorecrest was founded, different things that might be of interest to people. None of these are written in stone, so we could think about historical things we might want to add to that. Could even change them up as I also have the parks, Lake Forest Park parks, which are pretty cool because they all happen right in this time period. Oops, I can't use that. Anyway, towards the end over there, a whole bunch of parks like Blue Heron, Lion, Grace Cole, all of those ones kind of came in a 20-year period, which is sort of interesting. That coincides right with where the red starts. And then above this whole thing on the bottom, I'd like to have some sort of display where we can curate activities or information on a bulletin board like thing. So what I'm thinking right now is like a strip of bulletin boards that we could hang posters or informational things on, at least for now. So I've put on some categories on there. Again, like this is all just sort of me mocking up things, and we can change whatever topics we would like to have up there. And what I'd like to do is get volunteers who would head up different categories and keep those current as we went through. And when I have up there also, I'd like to highlight an LFP environmental hero each season or something. So we could maybe say, look at what Mayor French has done for the environment this season. Yay, Mayor French, and celebrate whatever is going on there or the council or whatever it is. So that's what those little white squares in the middle are. On the right, I also was thinking we could have a mailbox. So it would be nice to make this more interactive. We can have QR codes on there. People can scan, get more information about anything that's up there, and also interact with web-based questionnaires or something, or ways that that the public can put in their thoughts, and also a mailbox so we could ask questions of what do you think about what's your favorite stream in Lake Forest Park, or whatever question we ask, and they can put their interaction with us in through that mailbox as well. Anyway, those are the sorts of ideas I'm thinking about this mural. I would love at some point, oops, to upgrade to a video screen, which I don't think would be very hard. This is an example of one that's at the University of Washington Bothell campus. So adding like a video screen in there would be really fun. And yeah, I was also thinking about how to make sure that our information that is posted up there doesn't get damaged or taken or whatever. Maybe with plexiglass on top or cases or something. This is an image of a case at UW Bothell that has information in it. Just make people think. And then I'm looking into funding and support. So I've kind of been keeping a little tally of places where money may come to support this kind of thing. There's a lot out there. So if you've got ideas for any of this, I am all ears and would love to involve everybody. Also, the CATS course has many cohorts of alums that are very eager to participate in this too. So I think it'll be not too hard to drum up volunteers to help with putting it together.
Do you have a sense of how much it costs?
Not really. I mean, the basics I don't think would cost a lot. And I think that there's enough little money around that we could cover like printing or paint or whatever we wanted to do for.
So
I
what,
did- I emailed Republic Service, I'm waiting on it.
Republic
email,
Service,
But I
yes.
think they would be a good addition.
Yes.
Even if like some sort of. Yeah.
I
good
think that's
addition of-
brilliant. And I also had added in Third Place Commons as another support here. But yes, thank you.
and the bookstore?
Oh, separate from Third Place Commons?
Mhm.
Yeah. Bookstore, okay.
So what do you, I think one of the, what do you, first of all, what do you think?
This is awesome, Dana. Thank you
Yes.
so much for doing all of this research and getting Third Place Commons to agree to this. I mean, so cool having the mural and the kiosk and all of this. Thank you.
Yeah,
just
seriously, thank
fantastic.
you.
Yeah, it's wonderful, Dana. It's fantastic. And Dana, I want to know how you got Merlin Geyer to agree to anything.
Well, it was because Sarah is so wonderful. I think they trust and love her by association. I
Gotcha.
wrote hotel. But they're very enthusiastic about this.
Yeah, it is. I sort of with Linda, it is kind of stunning.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
this is
this is
fabulous.
fantastic.
One of the questions I have is if we should officially adopt this as one of the programs of the Climate Action Committee.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's outreach to the community is fundamental, and this is the most extraordinary opportunity.
Yes, it is.
And I do think it's going to take some, it's not just printing that. I love the conceptualization of the large mural, and having a way to physically protect it so it doesn't get damaged, but that we can get in and update the various sections without taking off a 20 by 8 foot piece of plexiglass. It's going to take a little bit to get this up and sorted out, but my goodness, what a fantastic opportunity. What a great vision. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Dana, fantastic. Wonderful.
So I love the idea, Dana. It's amazing. And I guess what I'm kind of, am I envisioning this wrong? Is it kind of like a 3-dimensional, like you had that cabinet, that wooden cabinet that would be able to open and close or slide open or something like that? Is that what you're kind of envisioning, or is it something more one-dimensional, like flat against the wall?
Well, it's both. So they have offered us the space, that brown wall, and actually I'm going to ask them for the whole thing. I had asked for just that one part, but I don't think they're going to object to us taking the whole wall all the way along. And then in front of, so I don't know if you remember in the commons there, it's sort of a bent wall. It's just to the right of the stage. And that kiosk that's there, I envision staying there, and they've agreed to let us use it. So, you know, it plugs in and it has lights and plugs and stuff, so you could have computer exhibits or whatever in there. And it also has storage for things like we could have exhibits on, or, you know, just hands-on things like how fast does ice melt or whatever it is, that we could go down and just sort of like do little events every now and then that we could advertise to engage people, kids or whatever, that come through there. So yeah, it is a two-dimensional thing on the wall, but we also have access to this cabinet that's can store interactive things for us.
And Sarah, do we still have money left over from our budget, or are we spent?
No, I think we have money. I mean, we haven't spent it all, but whether or not the council is gonna grab it back before we get a chance to spend it.
Quick.
Yeah, so
Go
this
ahead
is
and
a great,
buy.
you know, I think this is, if we decide this, you know, I don't wanna, I mean, is it your sense, Dana, that this is an appropriate thing for the Climate Action Committee? We don't wanna.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah.
Should have asked you that before. So I guess, so yes, there is money, and I think a piece of that, I mean, we could make a case for spending some money there. But I don't know. Corey, could you find out for us how much is left in that budget? And
I was just going to say too, Sarah, that the fact that if we've ever wanted to highlight parts of the Climate Action Committee more
Yes.
to a public, you could
Yes.
use Merle. I mean, this would be the fantastic advertisement to say, hey, did you know that our climate action plan actually involves such and such? You know, that would be a great place to advertise something like that.
Yeah.
And we can partner with things, organizations, stream keepers, the pollinator gardens or whatever they are.
Yeah, there's so many things going on in Lake Forest Park that
Yeah.
see that these things could be highlighted here and get everybody in the know.
So what do you see, Dana, as the next step?
Well, I think that there are sort of basic steps to go with. Like this could grow in all sorts of different ways, but I'm thinking that basic things would be to figure out like how much of this we want to do as a mural with painting on the wall, and how much we might want to do, like Sarah or me or somebody suggested that instead of painting the stripes on the bottom, we have them printed on canvas or vinyl or something, like a big banner, and then we just stick that onto the wall, which would be a lot easier than painting.
Yeah.
And also mobile perhaps, so if we ever wanted to move it, we could. So investigating that kind of thing and how much that would cost, if that's a feasible thing, exploring, you know, any possible connections we have in the community for people who might be able to get us in on.
I was going to say, I think for this to really become solid, we would need to figure out the material that we would need to use. And Dana, I think it has to be mobile, because as willing as Merlin Geyer is right now, we have no idea what they're going to be like in a month or two. It's got to be something that we could take down and maybe post somewhere else, or you know somewhere. So I think yeah, figuring out like the material costs of something that, and figure out what material we want to use, and then what the cost is to make it so it's kind of like a panel that we could then take off and replace and things like that, and also make it more mobile. I think that would be my vote, at least.
We could also consider it as a series of panels so that, because this is a very large area and it's uncommon to have such a large area available as a single expanse. But if I mean, the way that the whole bit is set up, if the backdrop were, for instance, printed on fabric, and then the different panels were of a reasonable width so that they could be taken off and used independently of the backdrop, that'd make it very, very flexible. I think your fundamental design's just brilliant, Dana. It's just brilliant.
And Brian, you brought up a good point. The contract negotiator in me is thinking we need a contract with them on this. I mean, we need, like, there's going to be some kind of liability, right? Like if we mess up their wall or something, I mean, we're definitely going to need to get an agreement in place. I assume it would be between the city and Merlin Geyer, but we would need some kind of agreement in place. I think we would want one. You know, and what we can and can't do.
Yeah, they did talk about being added as an additionally insured. They're worried about trip hazard, so that's
During the process of building it, they didn't talk about that as extending into the life of the mural.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah. So I'd like to do two things. One is I'd like to take an official action so that we say that this climate hub incorporates into the outreach of the program of the Climate Action Committee. Is there?
I second.
I think you have to first it. I think I can't make it. So first.
I first and second it. No, I can't do that. I'll just first it. How about if I first it?
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
I.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is there a small group of people who would like to work with Dana?
I will.
The next step?
I'd like to.
On there. Yay.
Linda, Mimi? Okay. I do too.
I also like the idea of getting Austin involved in this too, if he can. He may be gone somewhere and making better things, but
Yeah, no, I think he would be a great resource. And also the urban artworks that he works through is another great resource that we can use.
In the chat, I also put, like, you know, if we want to include Shore Lake Arts and Shoreline Schools as collaborators.
Yeah, great idea.
Arts. They give out grants too.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
That's a great idea. And I think we could have like a portion of the wall would have our, you know, our supporters and affiliates there.
This is exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Very.
Okay. Are there other things we should talk about? Nope. Okay.
Well, I have, Sarah, can I ask one more quick question for Dana? If I could get some kind of a sense of a budget here, because I have a budget of the committee that I chair for Rotary, the Environmental Sustainability Committee, and it might be possible that I could look at getting some money from that committee to do something, you know, one piece of it. But if I could see a budget, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, so that is something that should be done immediately, I think, is trying to figure out kind of initial costs, at least to get it going. Right. Yeah, so I'll try to do that. I'll also, maybe, can you send out the PowerPoint to everybody? It's got notes in there that you can look at and add to, correct, whatever.
Okay. No, this is right.
Actually, I was adding to it also, so. Can I send you the new version of it?
Yes. Okay, so we'll send out the PowerPoint. We'll move forward with that. Tracy, I know, has to leave. Do you have anything you want to share with us before you are escorted out of the Eugene Public Library?
Yes, they're looking in the door kind of concerned. But yeah, real quickly, the two items that are on there. The artist for the comic book. I've made some progress in that. There's a new Shoreline Arts board member, Kristen Wickersham, who is basically an artist, and she actually sent two different forums in which we could post our requirements for the graphic novelization of the climate action plan. So I think I'm going to move forward with that and see what's out there. Who wants to work for us. Do we have, so that, again, kind of aligned with our budget question, do we have any money left, Corey, for basically paying somebody a stipend to do the comic book?
You guys are gonna have to decide now, but,
We
yeah,
need-
there's money, there's like 10,000 left, I think.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so between this mural project and the comic book, we might have to negotiate about what can be spent on what. So, but I'll move forward and see what's out there because it may be the case where nobody works that cheap anymore. So who knows? The other thing is that the Octavia Butler thing that's a little bit further down on the schedule. I've signed up to volunteer for WorldCon, which is a big science fiction convention. It's in Seattle in 2025, August 13th through 15th. In fact, in the chat, I'll post their site. And they're looking for local writers, especially in science fiction, who might be celebrated during this time. Can you think of anyone? Of course you can. Okay. So I was going to reach out to them because, we have Octavia Butler Boulevard. This was the last place she lived. So the fact is that they would love to have that kind of connection. So with the committee's permission, I'd like to move forward talking to them about it and how they can be involved. Okay. So what I might need the committee to do at some point then is to put something together, either in conjunction with Third Place Books or whoever, with about basically Olivia Butler's significance in Lake Forest Park. So like a one-pager kind of thing.
Octavia Butler's
Yes.
importance in Lake Forest Park.
Mhm.
We are having, well, we're jumping ahead, but we are having a meeting on Octavia Butler in September, and we're gonna try and get that off our plate and moved over to the library. So-
And the historical museum?
And then, yeah, maybe.
Mhm.
Okay.
So,
So,
and that's it for me.
anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
All right. I gotta go, guys. Thanks very much, though. We'll see you when I get back.
Stay cool, Tracy.
Thank you.
See you, Tracy.
Take care. See you, Dana, on Monday.
Okay. It's 103 on the west side in LA.
Okay, I don't know. Oh, God. Okay, back to this. I can't figure out how to open these things that I sent you, but there was a sort of a synopsis for this comic book. We talked about the audience and I will send it out again. It was sort of using a budget of $1,000 to see if we could get somebody who could sort of pull this together. There's a woman who works at that Tracy had suggested I talk to, who works at one of the printing presses and has done some work on these kinds of things. But the
May I just probably rename it graphic novel? It's like that.
graphic, not a
Yeah.
comic book. Sure, good word. Okay, I'm gonna, let's see, if I stop sharing this and open something else, will that work? Should, right? Open this. Ooh, no word is available. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm just
Do you want one of these?
cancel. Can you open it?
Is it one of these ones that you sent?
Yeah, it's the comic that will now to be, no. I'm sorry. It's just a synopsis and we'll move on. Okay, the other thing we want to talk about is while that's happening is the book club, maybe. That's you.
Okay, just a reminder to everybody out there in the public and you guys we took August off. And, the group decided that we should read The Water Knife by Paulo Bassi. As our next read, and Sarah's finished it already. And to get notified about what book we're on or whatever, there's an email group, Sarah didn't put the email.
I couldn't remember it.
It's LFP Book Club
Oh.
at Gmail. And the book that we're reading is usually available, in the bookstores on the shelf, and you get a discount if you tell them you're buying it as part of the book club. And we've been meeting the last Wednesday of the month at 5:30 on a table near the stage in the Commons. So.
Or elsewhere, but so you have to read the email that comes out.
Right, or just email me and I'll get you on the list of people interested. And every once in a while, the person in the that does the book club stuff for the bookstore asks me if we are open to new members, and the answer is always yes. That's the idea, is to be inclusive of anyone who's interested and provide this opportunity to talk about climate related. So far we were doing nonfiction before, and now we've been doing fiction, and we'll discuss what to do next at the next meeting. So yeah, we're looking forward to talking about this very uplifting.
One more dystopic novel for the future of climate. But they're very provocative conversations. This is not a program of the Climate Action Committee, but it is a spin-off. So if all of us can come to the same meeting. It's not an official, it's just something that got spun off. It happened at the farmer's market. There were some young people who came and thought we should start a book club last year, and so we did. And it's an opportunity to talk to new people about some of the issues that are coming forward. Anybody have any questions? Right, okay. Then we talked a little bit about Octavia Butler. There's another thing we want to get off our list. Octavia Butler is that we'd read, the book club had actually read Octavia Butler's book, and we had hoped that the city reads program for the Shoreline and Lake Forest Park might pick it up. They were not quite interested in it, but it turned out there's a sort of a bubbling interest in Octavia Butler around our area and among people who like science fiction and like looking at this. And so we put a group of people together, and it's a group of people that include the bookstore and the African American History Museum and the library, King County Library, the person in charge of diversity, the Lake Forest Park local librarian, Mimi, and the bookstore. And then people who knew Octavia Butler are interested in it. The Shoreline Museum is interested in collecting both artifacts and stories. And sort of, this is again something that's spun off that we would like to see if we can't move over to somebody else taking charge of it. And the organizational meeting is on September 24th at 9:30 in the morning in the Commons. Anybody is welcome to come. Are there any questions about that? Nope. Nope. Okay, let's move on. Okay.
I do have, sorry, one question. Is that like, so it said anyone's welcome, so I like okay to share on social media?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
So that's sort of all catching up. The next part of the question is really, I think, sort of a fundamental question that we have, and that is, how do we move the climate action implementation forward? The city has sent, and I just wanted to share these two things that the city had sent out to everybody in some, sorry. In some, stop share, start share. Where'd it go?
I sympathize.
You sympathize, that's not good enough. Share. Right? Click on this, right? Click on this. Okay. What the city has said, is, in their publications is that the budget for the next 2 years will be discussed on September 30th at 6 p.m. The city has started a biennial process cycle during which the mayor, the staff prepare the mayor's preliminary budget for 25-26 to guide the city's priorities and initiatives over the next 2 years. So there's a 2-year budget. If we don't get in this budget or our programs aren't in this budget, we're out for 2 years. Just say that. Throughout this month, the city council will review the mayor's preliminary budget in a series of public meetings, which feature detailed department presentations from each city department. To stay informed, be sure to check into the adopted budget calendar, and I put some of that down below, for specific dates and times of these meetings. And then they've said that our input matters. This is not to us as the Climate Action Committee, but to the citizens of Lake Forest Park. The mayor, the city council, and the staff welcome and encourage residents' participation in the budget process. This month culminates in a city council special meeting on September 30th, 6 p.m., when residents be invited to provide public comment on the preliminary budget, following the month of presentations and detailing the construction of the 2025-26 biennial budget. And then the mayor added in his note to us that he said there's still plenty of time for the Climate Action Committee members to advocate specific programs. So that's sort of the framework. It's a 2-year budget, and the process is that the mayor develops a budget. He's in consultation with all of the departments, which describe their needs and describe how they plan to spend that money, the money that would be allocated in the budget. And then that budget that the mayor creates is turned over to the city council. And the city council actually kind of takes a look at the budget again and says, do we like this? Do we not like this? So the budget shifts from the mayor's budget, and then it becomes the city council's budget. And it's the city council that finally passes the final budget. So there are sort of 2 opportunities to look at getting input into the budget process and into the mayor's budget. And then at first into the mayor's budget and then into the council's budget. It's a sort of a little bit, it's just the way it works. It's weird, but it's, you know, the council doesn't have the capacity or the staff to develop a preliminary budget. So the mayor does that, the mayor and the staff do that, and then they turn that over to the city council for review, and they can ask questions and bring people forward. We got to figure out if we want to play in this in the next 2 months about how we will proceed in terms of moving our agenda. I think the question is, how do we make an impact, and what are our key messages to the mayor and the city council? I'm going to go through all of this and then come back. We have invited the mayor to come to our October 1st meeting. I have not heard back from him yet. I told him that if he couldn't, it's after he's completed his budget and pass it on to the council. He's still influential, of course. And I said, if he couldn't come to the October 1st meeting, if he had a date and time that he could come, that we would see if we could change our meeting to accommodate his timeline. But again, I thought I might have an answer, but I don't have an answer about when he might be able to do that. But I thought that it would be, no matter what, it would be a more fulsome conversation if we developed a set of questions for it. Those are sort of they're sort of three separate things. The city council's meeting on the mayor's budget, September 12th, 19th, 23rd, 26th, and then on the 30th is this public hearing. Each of those meetings has a public comment period in which we could make a case, begin to make a case. The question is, again, do we want to make an impact, and what are our key messages both to the mayor and the city council? Is there anything I've missed there, Corey? In terms of the structure, I'm not asking for the content of the key messages. And we've had, so I'm throwing that open to see where you all are on this in terms of how you think we should proceed in terms of getting our programs into the budget.
What does the city's budget look like? I don't know, I have no idea.
Is it published yet, or is it out
It's
there?
like last year's budget, or the last biennium 2-year budget.
It's online.
Is it on, it's online,
Is
so
that
we
right
can
now?
take a look and see kind of how money is distributed in general.
Right.
I mean, you can go from asking for a cup of coffee to asking for a person to be fired. I mean, there's this huge range.
Exactly.
So I'm just wondering how to think about it.
I wish I knew the answer to that. And it seems to me we made a case to the council. We told them what we wanted. And then there's been kind of radio silence since then from the council and from the mayor. So
But maybe it's in the budget.
good question to ask.
I think I mean, obviously we want a climate action committee person to be hired. But I think we talked about this last time. I can't remember if it was last meeting or 2 meetings ago. We did talk about the idea of floating a co-climate committee person for different cities, and I'm wondering if we don't get funding for a climate action person, do we entertain that idea?
Yes, of course we do. Don't you think? But I don't want to start there.
Well, no, but I guess we have to paint the we have to paint the full picture, right? And I think, anyways, I don't, I'm being pessimistic in my own views because I am a pessimistic person. That's why I am.
No,
I think what Tracy was talking about, if I recall, was K4C providing funds for small cities to hire one person who would work with a number of cities. Is that, I was not at the last meeting, so I think that's what it is.
That was the idea, but he had no information on it. I don't think we've received draft minutes from the last meeting, have we yet, Corey?
No, I haven't got to them. It's up.
But that was my recollection was he had not made any progress or had any updates from K4C, and there's no. I was under the impression that hiring staff to work on grant fundraising and other efforts to fund climate actions in the city of Lake Forest Park was not high on anyone else's agenda.
Well, our job is to make it high on their agenda, right?
Absolutely. I'm just saying it's not starting off as a place of universal agreement of high priority. So to get it to be a priority, we need to work.
Yes, and I suggest, you know, maybe we don't get it. I mean, I think. I don't want to join Brian's camp here, but let's say we don't get it. It doesn't mean that the efforts to talk about it don't put us in a position in 2 years to get somebody. That it may be incremental, although I don't think we want to start with, okay, we don't need somebody, because if you want to move on this issue, you need somebody, I think.
Well, not only do we need somebody, but if we keep asking to work towards that now, there are many sources of funding that may become available over the next 2 years, where if we're ready and prepared and have a plan in place for actually using that resource, then we can hop on it. It's very much, you know, it is very timely for us to have a climate action plan being written at a time when the Planning Commission, when there were funds available, because others hadn't asked for them, that were available for climate planning in Lake Forest Park in general. So the large project that's being run parallel to ours is, you know, serendipitous. But because the city was prepared and ready to step forward, funds that would otherwise have not been available were available to us. So I agree completely. We just have to keep working with the presumption that this is something we need and we should plan on and be prepared to enact. And we'll see where the city is in its budgeting strategy, but we shouldn't make any assumptions about not having funds available.
Well, yes, I agree, Ann, absolutely. I would propose that for the next 5 meetings, September 12, 19, 23, 26, we make public comments on the need to, on various aspects of the program. So that the council hears us 4 times before the public. Is the 30th, I'm sorry, I already forgot what I wrote. Is the 30th a public hearing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
The council-
this would also be the time to mobilize all those people who signed up on our email list at every event we've ever had. Is like, you know, this is probably the easiest, most impactful way for them to help the committee is to submit comments at all those meetings.
Mhm. Yes,
Good idea.
good idea. Is there, I would like to know if there are 4 of us who might be able to speak, one of us each, at least at each of the council meetings from September 12, 19, 23, 26, and 30. Is there anybody who could talk on any of those days?
Is there a structure to these dates? Like, does he talk about one part of the budget on one date and another part on another? Or is that what?
It seems to me the answer is yes. It seems to me there.
'Cause it might be worth like figuring out what would fit best into.
Well, the content, the citizens' comment precedes the content of the council meeting.
Right.
The council meetings will be, I believe that they're presentations from various departments on each of those days. Is that right, Corey?
I don't know how they've set it up this year. I've not been,
How would we find that out?
probably online or contact the finance director.
It is online. You know, where they talked here about deliberations and recommendations, they had some content here.
Okay.
And can you just see if you can find it? Look for the city council meetings.
Sarah, I could talk on the 26th. Put me down for the 26th.
Okay. September 26th, Brian.
Sarah, I'll be able to talk at some point, but my computer is not working right now, so I'll have to follow up with you regarding one or more dates.
I'm gonna put you down for the 23rd, but I penciled it in. Okay,
So what dates are left?
well, 12, 19, 23rd. I mean, Anne is
30th.
flexible.
Yeah.
Third,
I appreciate it.
can you do one, Matt?
Yeah, I'll try to do the 19th.
Okay,
Are we gonna coordinate our message so we have a statement for each one?
I think so. Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
good. What, Dana, can you do the 12th? Just because you can talk about the climate hub and then also talk about what it needs to support that and how we can move that seems like a really positive thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing. I will not be in town on the 12th.
Okay,
Could I do the 19th?
okay, Matt, can we bump you off the 19th?
Yeah.
Can you do the 12th?
I think so. Yeah.
This is not to say that every member of the committee could go to every single meeting and talk at every single meeting. I just wanted to say that.
Which would be
Which would be good.
good. And maybe we can get t-shirts made up.
Let's say, hire a manager.
Sarah, do you still need any dates?
I don't have any that don't have anybody.
Okay.
I don't think.
Well, we
19
can have double.
Yeah, oh no, September 26th. Yeah,
The 30th,
yes, Tama, how about the 30th?
I'll be at the tribal conference. On the 30th.
Well, how about we put you on for September 23rd?
Uh,
Anne's date, but she doesn't know, and we'll add Anne into whatever date she picks. So there'll be two of us. Does that work?
I can't do the 23rd either. Sorry, I want to be helpful.
Put Anne back in on the 23rd.
Yeah, well, just add Tamara, add on to whichever date is available to
Okay.
you.
What day do you
Sounds
want?
good. I'll be, yeah, I'll put myself as backup. I'll check my calendar and see if I can be backup for any of these dates.
Okay, and it doesn't mean, backup doesn't mean that you can't both, then we get 6 minutes to tell our story.
Exactly. You know, the
Okay.
more people who speak about the same issue, it actually has a bigger impact.
Absolutely.
I like Dana's idea of a t-shirt. Maybe we could get our mascot like flipped upside down with like bubbles coming out of its mouth because the temperature's too warm. It's
It's
dying.
Yeah, what are
Okay.
so it's been mentioned that this is not, climate is probably not their top priority, but what are the levers that they care about? Like if we're thinking about how to message, like what are the things that we're competing with, and what are the emotions or pressures that they might be vulnerable to?
I think that the issue that this, and I'm talking, I'm doing the best I can. I hope this is correct. But the city has got a structural deficit where they are capped in terms of how much increase they can get, and inflation exceeds that. So every year, their budget, they have a budget which is smaller to cover the same sort of things. So always the issue is competing not between good things and bad things, but competing between good things and good things. So the biggest item in the budget is the police department. And the second biggest item is the public works department. And then smaller are the issues of community development that Mark Hoffman runs. And then there's some internal operations, the front desk. And so I think that all of the council members will be struggling with the issue of how do you create a budget that's responsive to what they see as the citizens' needs. And so what we need to do is raise the citizens' needs. But we'll be competing, if that phrase, with the police department that says they need a new police officer or so this is not the capital budget, which is cars and whatever that happens in the off year. They update that. So it's really about programs and the programs and managing the city.
And it's at 6 o'clock on all of those dates.
That is a very good question, and I will follow up with the specific details.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, just in the timing, like when it will end.
Right. Oh,
So,
the good news is you just come in, you make your comments, and then you can leave. You don't have to stay.
Okay.
So it could be, if you arrived exactly at time, it could be 3 minutes, but probably have to stay in for the, they always have a proclamation or two that precedes public comment.
I just have Matt, you asked about, I don't know how you worded it, but sticky points or whatever it is that you said, you didn't say that, but, in terms of the points that we might make. I'm trying to think of this person as the city's person to do implementation. And one of the things that's going to happen is that next summer, the climate, I keep forgetting the name of it. The climate unit that would be part of the comprehensive plan will be finalized next summer. And they will be faced with the same issue as we were faced with implementation of those policies or concepts that are part of that unit, the climate unit in the comp plan. And so really, the city does need somebody over time, in time, or people within the city who are going to be looking at policies that are responsive to the climate. So I'm not sure whether that's the point to talk about in this context with them and to make that a visible thing in these things. And they're going to need to commit resources to implementing climate relevant programs.
No, I think that's a big, Mimi, I think you hit it. That would be our leverage, was the fact that they're going to have to do something. So why not, use this as a bridge between the Climate Action Committee and the comprehensive plan.
Yeah. And really, we're working with the city. We're not like us and them. We are part of the city. And so how do we do that? How do we help make the city ready for a year from now when the comp plan is completely complete? So that's kind of something that I've been thinking about in terms of an argument.
And I think also there's an issue around, it's not going to get cheaper next year to do this. I mean, if you put off building resiliency or building the kinds of things that we talked about, next year it's going to be more expensive. And the impacts of climate may make it more expensive if you don't begin remediation and action this year.
And something else that goes along with that sort of collaborative work with the other cities is that if we have somebody in place that is working with climate change, the cost can be, that person can oversee that the cost isn't just a Lake Forest Park burden. Like, we can share these actions with neighboring cities, and that would, without a person in place that organizes that, though, we're going to be burdening all the costs. So I would say that's another really good point.
The climate hub that Dana is making is actually something that's in the climate action plan. It's creating something like this. It is part of our plan. So there are things that are moving forward that are part of the plan. And keeping those things going with the support of the city, that's something else to talk about.
Right, that's volunteer hours rather than a,
But there's resources that will be important to
Yeah.
making it, giving it the biggest impact it can have. And so having a person in the city or contacts in the city who are going to help with that will make it better, make it a more useful resource for the city as well as for the.
right.
Okay, I will, are there other comments on this? I'll summarize these notes and send them out. But I do think sometimes I forget that we're all on the same team, and it isn't that I don't believe there's a council member or the mayor who isn't interested in the impact of climate. I mean, they accepted our plan, and now we're just sort of moving forward with them on this, sort of figuring out collaboratively, I think is a key word, what the next step is.
Sarah, just one more thing to add, and
Please.
this is something exactly what you're just hitting on with that collaborative effort, is that it has been shown time and time again, prevention planning is far less expensive than the action you need to do to clean up or to repair.
Yeah,
It is absolutely the trademark for environmental disasters when we don't plan. So,
But that's the problem of the people like 5 or 6 years from now.
I'm going to be here 5 or 6 years from now. I don't know about you.
Oh, I'm just saying that that's,
Mr.
why,
Rivera.
that's why people, it's like, well, if I'm going to be in
Yeah.
office for the next 4 years, and then why am I going to take the hit for something that's not going to happen until after I'm gone?
Wow.
Because you're already working on that, things that happened 6 years ago that, or that didn't ever happen then.
Yeah, this actually is a major challenge of democracy. And it did start with, I believe it's a 2% cap on the rate at which property taxes could grow. And one of the ironies of that is that I believe, and Sarah probably has a better memory than I on these issues, but I believe the city of Lake Forest Park took pride in not executing the full 2% increment each year, which means that every year you fall further behind, and to catch up, you'd have to do an even larger increment. And so, we have effectively defunded our police department, public works, everything else for quite a long time, as people took pride in minimizing property taxes. But the Lake Forest Park component of the property tax is actually quite small, and all it did was hamstring our ability to adjust.
So to answer Matt's question, this is where we have to come up with that kind of data, though, that shows how, there actually is this dollar value that you are going to pay. You are going to pay this, and you're going to pay either double or triple or whatever, depending on what actions we take now. I think there's a strong argument for that.
Well, there's also the moral hazard of like the mayor's not going to pay for it. The mayor's going to use the people's money to pay for it. And so.
But we're not talking to the mayor. We're talking to, well, I guess we are.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm trying to think of, and this is going to be my own bias showing, but let me see how this lands. What does the climate person give that, rather than approaching it as like, well, we're going to have to do this, so we may as well do it. Like, come up with some things that are like, well, which is going to make the public more likely to want to vote for you, in the next election. Another police officer to stand on a street corner and accost homeless people, or like a program where you helped people get filters and fans and N95s and stuff when smoke season came, because you wanted to make sure that the people of Lake Forest Park were safe from, inhaling all these, particulates, and, kids with asthma, like kind of go with that kind of angle of like, these are things that you can tout later that you did for people, and they're kind of like feel good things. I don't know.
Well, I think the first thing we do is we don't make it an if and there or if and but. You know, we either have a climate action person or we have another police officer. That I don't.
No,
I
I'm not saying say that. I'm just
I know.
saying think about what are some things that the people listening will want to tout next time there's an election cycle. Like if they hire this climate person, what is that going to do to make the citizens of Lake Forest Park be like, wow, I'm really glad these people were in charge?
Yeah, and I think we could put some numbers in a case for that, and to so the mayor could tout that as a way for re-elections. Is that they could say, hey, I advocated for this, so that's going to save you such and such dollars for next year, and you're not going to have to pay that or whatever. I don't know. There's got to be a way we could twist the data that way.
Right, and I think it's important to say we're positive, we're team players, we want to be part of this, the solutions to climate, want to make it happen for the citizens of Lake Forest Park. But the
Yeah,
other thing I add to this
I don't
list.
think it's,
is there-
I want to just comment quickly. I don't think it's a matter of twisting data. I think it's a matter of organizing and presenting data.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, I
being
think
tongue in cheek in that one. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I think having good data on like this is the number of people who said climate was a big issue for them. So, you know, if you do something about this, you're speaking to those people. And if you don't, then, you know, that's a good chunk of your electorate that you're not speaking to.
Yes, good point.
And
So
I
that
just, that I think
that's
also-
data that we have, right? Like all these surveys that we've done about like how many people are very concerned about climate change.
Yep, we have that data. The other thing is, I think it's important to say there is money on the table that we're not picking up because there isn't somebody paying attention. You know, there's money for, it requires work. I mean, nobody's telling you, but I mean, it's often targeted for, you know, low-income people, but we have low-income people in like Forest Park, and we ought to be helping them get those issues, get those, you know, updates in their homes. But, and the money is on the table from various, if 2117 doesn't, no. Okay, are there other issues that we ought to sort of do in a policy brief there? Okay. Okay, and the other thing is I do want to encourage you to come to all of those, tune into the meetings. You don't have to actually come, you don't have to come to the meeting to make the oral presentation, but if you don't, you have to do it well in advance if you're not coming in person. And I think there's something helpful about being in person, because you're looking the council members in the eye and they're looking at you, and I think that's helpful.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything else that is not on the agenda that we ought to be talking about? Okay.
Oh, I know one other thing. So there were some people that are interested in joining this committee. Do we have extra positions that, I mean, we have 2 student positions. And I know that Jessica hasn't been at the committee for a long time and may be not interested in continuing. But we did see several people at, was it at the farmer's market this time? Or
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, Dana. 'Cause, yeah, that was.
that we could, you know, get involved.
Wasn't there talk about converting the student position to a regular position at some point?
Yes, but yes.
I would prefer to have students, but
Yeah,
if they don't
we
wanna.
prefer to have somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I think if we become more visible with like the whole
Yeah.
thing and students see that
exactly.
there might be more interest.
But have you heard from Jessica? Is she,
She told me she couldn't come today. She did send a note.
so she wants to continue?
Yeah.
This was a moved meeting. So Yeah, I don't fault people for not being able to attend a move meeting.
Yeah,
Okay. But I think that's an important question and it may be. We need to figure out if people are interested in joining our committee, we gotta figure out how to get them here.
Yeah.
On the committee. And it may, and I, these are kind of informal meetings. If they wanted just to come, either in person or online, we could sit them at the table and join the discussions. I think.
Absolutely. Public, open to the public, so.
Right. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Are there other things that we need to think about?
Well, if we're in good of the order,
Yeah.
I would just like to thank from the bottom of my heart, everyone, Tamara, Matt, Dana, Mimi, who staffed the farmer's market when I had COVID. I'm ever so grateful that people stepped forward and collaborated and filled in and took on the task. Sometimes with very short notice, so that I could just disappear and recuperate.
We're glad you're healthy, man.
Yeah. And thanks for
Yeah.
helping us get it set up.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Move to adjourn? Anybody want to move to adjourn?
A
Move
second.
to adjourn.
Okay. Thank you I should too late. Thank you so much. I think that we moved a lot of issues along, sort of visible, and so excited about the coming tide. Okay, the next meeting is October 1st, unless we hear from the mayor.
Okay,
Come to that one. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
thank you.
Take care.